going to get started. So would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great turnout. Thank you all for coming. It was a nice surprise to see so many faces that I know. A couple things. We want to do an announcement on what our upcoming speaker series is for the year. So for 2023, for those who don't know, and I think everybody pretty much may know by now, the town of Coeymans is celebrating its 350th anniversary this coming year, 2023. It'll be 350 years since Baron Peter Coeymans acquired the Coeymans patent. So it's all of the property Coeymans patent is from the South Bethlehem line, almost, it's into part of Coxsackie. It's actually budded the Bronk family property on the Bronk patent down by Coxsackie. So we're celebrating that. If everybody, those of you who were back here in 1973 will remember we had the big tricentennial. It's 50 years since the tricentennial. So those of us who were there, we were young, right now. We all had facial hair back then, just for that 1 year. So as part of that, we're focusing all of our speaker series this year on local history. So today is the first of that series where we're going to talk about the history of the Catholic community in the town of Coeymans. Next month, John Blaisdell, who's with us today, is going to do a presentation on the Fletcher Blaisdell diaries. Fletcher wrote extensive diaries, and John and his sister Linda transcribed them into a book. And John's going to speak to us, and there's fascinating stories in this thing. So make sure you mark your calendar for that. That's on February 12th at 2 p.m. March 12th, Dennis Whalen, who's also with us today, is going to speak on the whole Coeymans Landing. And if you're familiar with, a lot of you probably have seen or may even have a copy of that three-dimensional map known as the Burley map, where it shows like a bird's eye view of Coeymans. He's going to talk about that and some of the buildings and who was in those buildings back then and maybe what they are today. Then April 16th, which is 1 week later than our normal second Sunday meeting due to Easter Sunday, Tom Sweeney, who's with Alcove Preservation, is going to do a presentation on the history of Stevensville, Alcove, and Indian Fields. So a lot of information about Indian Fields and what it looked like prior to them building the Alcove Reservoir. Again, will be interesting. And then we move into the month of June, and the month of June is going to be the town of Coeymans' 350th celebration. So on June 9th, which is Friday evening, the events are going to be out at Gerolman Park. The band Skeeter Creek is going to be playing. There's going to be food vendors and other activities out there on Friday night. Saturday the 10th is kicking off with a morning prayer service by the Ecumenical Council. Probably that's going to be held at Coeymans Landing because we'll already have a stage set up down there. And then at noon there's going to be a parade that kicks off. It will start up in the Woodlawn area where they will gather, and they will start at Main Street, beginning at 9W Main, and come all the way down Main Street into Coeymans. And then at the end of the parade, there's an all-day celebration at Coeymans Landing. There's going to be music all day long. In the evening, the band The Refrigerators will be there. It's going to conclude with fireworks. There's going to be all kinds of vendors and displays and other events. So mark your calendars for those. They plan on big things going on those days. Our fall series will have 3 different speakers. John Bonafide will do a talk on the Jacob Parish family. Jacob Parish, if you're familiar, there's a cemetery at the end of Youthie Boulevard where Jacob Parish is buried. He's going to talk about that family and the connection to Coeymans. Karen Hess, who did a talk a number of years ago on Arianche Coeymans, is coming back to do a talk on Baron Coeymans. And then to conclude that series, Roger Wilbur, who's a member of the society and on the board, is going to do a talk on the history of businesses in Coeymans. He's been doing a lot of research going back through old papers and documents, documenting all of the businesses that have been here, and he's going to talk about, for instance, he'll take a building like the old Bush's building where it started off as Babcock and Baldwin and bring those businesses forward, show you the businesses and who's been in that particular building over the years. So we're looking forward to that, and they should be great programs. With that, I will begin. So welcome, and as I mentioned, our talk today is on the Catholic community in the town of Coeymans. So the history of Catholic community in the town of Coeymans, I want to start with a little bit of early Catholic New York timeline. So in 1632 we have the Jesuits who were coming in the area to minister the spiritual needs of settlers and native nations, Native Americans. And then 1642, Father Isaac Jones first appears in what becomes New York State. Prior to this, it's not New York State, it's not United States. We have settlers coming in from New France up north, which brought in a lot of Catholics in the northern area of New York. And there are also people coming in through the southern regions. In 1646, Father Isaac Jones and his companions are killed by the Mohawks. Most of you may have heard about Auriesville and the shrine out there, and that shrine is made for them. Then 1656, Kateri Tekakwitha is born in Mohawk Valley. And then we go to 1664, where the English now seize power from the Dutch, and Fort Orange is rechristened Albany to honor James, who is the Catholic brother of King Charles II. James, the Duke of Albany and York, and later he becomes the ill-fated James II. So just about after that timeline, we have 1673, Baron Coeymans settles in the town of Coeymans. He's building his house. If you're familiar with Coeymans Landing, at the foot of Westerlo Street, the corner of Westerlo, and almost first is where the Coeymans Castle stood, and that was Baron Coeymans' home. Later, he also builds the Coeymans House, which is the Lawler House today, which Arianche and her brother Samuel lived in. In 1676, Kateri Tekakwitha is baptized into the Catholic faith. Then we go to 1682 to 1688. We have Colonel Thomas Dungan, who's an Irish Catholic. He's in the Albany area, and he's the 4th English governor of New York. In 1686, he establishes the city charter, which Albany still operates under today. It's the oldest charter in the United States. In 1686 and 1687, there's 3 Jesuit priests from the New York City area that come up and minister and travel throughout New York to minister to the Dutch and French Catholics that are living in the area. And then we have the Glorious Revolution of 1688. And William of Orange, with the English wife Mary, take the throne, and Catholicism is out of favor. Governor Dongan is now out of a job. And what happens at that point is, because of the result of the Protestant ascendance to the British throne, the Catholics went underground. So you're trying to maintain your faith and not let people know that you're practicing it. In the late 1698, there are less than 1,500 people in Albany County, 380 men, 270 women, 800 children, and 23 Negroes, who were most likely slaves. If you've seen our slave exhibit that John Bonafini did for the open house, it talks about some of the slavery that was in the town of Coeymans, and it might be worth looking at it before you leave if you haven't seen it. In 1697, we have John Van Loan from Athens, who, if you're familiar with Athens and the Van Loan house, they actually found, he apparently was a Catholic sympathizer or perhaps a Catholic. They found Catholic artifacts and things in his house a few years after the 1697 area. 1700, the new governor, the Earl of Belmont, drafts an anti-Catholic law which prohibits priests from remaining in or coming to the province of New York. So they can't even come here and minister to Catholics. 1792, the Methodist Church, the first church in the town of Coeymans, is constructed. Does anybody know where that was? Bob should know. It's right next to his house. Yeah. It's over on the corner of Fuller Road off of 9W. It's built on, I believe that was Blaisdell property, right, John? Oh. And built by the Blaisdell family, or a conglomeration of Blaisdells and other friends. But it was a stone church. There's a historic marker still over there by that.
There's part of the foundation, excuse me.
Yeah, and there is part of the foundation. So that's the earliest church in the town of Coeymans. So we get to 1797, the first Albany parish is established, which is St. Mary's downtown. It's still an active church. It's the very first church. Now the first building is not the original, not the building that's there today. So we get to 1840 in the hamlet of Coeymans. Now hamlet of Coeymans is a bustling commercial center. Coeymans now has two churches, a Methodist and a Dutch Reformed. The Dutch Reformed is not the one that you're familiar with over on Church Street. It was actually over on Coeymans Square. Coeymans Square is the area kind of across from those who remember it as the old Key Bank, or where John Biscomb's office, kind of in that area was Coeymans Square. May 21st, 1847, Pope Pius IX establishes the Albany Diocese. So then the first establishment of a hierarchical Catholic group starts in Albany. September 19th, 1847, Father John McCloskey is installed as the first bishop. It includes 30,000 square miles, 60,000 Catholics, 25 churches, 34 priests, and 2 schools. So we get to Coeymans. So the 1840s, early Catholics in Coeymans, there were a few around. They would celebrate liturgy about twice a year. They would be traveling priests, circuit priests, who would come around on horseback and celebrate in their homes. 1845, what happens? The Irish potato famine hits. Over 1 million people die, and over 1 million people leave Ireland to come to the United States. So during that time period, we now see a transition of residents in the town of Coeymans and all the way through the whole Hudson Valley area. 1847, the first St. Mary's Church in Coxsackie is built on a lower landing lot. The first priest is Reverend William Howard, and then by 1850 he's succeeded by Reverend Francis Hurley. If you look at the circle there, that's kind of down where, if you're familiar with the new hotel that's going in down in Coxsackie, it's kind of across the street in that area someplace. I don't know exactly where. I didn't have time to research the specific site. So 1850s, we see this influx of Irish immigrants coming here to Coeymans, escaping the famine. They come here, they work in the stone quarries out in Alcove, they work in the brickyards. Some of them are blacksmiths. A lot of the women are servants, working in homes. The 1850 federal census listed 131 Irish-born citizens living in the town at that point. 1852, Father Francis Hurley from Coxsackie, under the guidance of Bishop McCluskey, is now tasked with purchasing land for a Catholic church in Coeymans. So who has the most land in Coeymans? Fletcher Blaisdell. So on April 20th, 1852, Father Hurley meets with Fletcher Blaisdell to discuss purchasing land for a church. And I want to thank John for this great map, because it shows the holdings of Fletcher at that time. And it's kind of neat to see it, because they go out together and they select a lot measuring 147 by 142 feet on a locky ledge above South Main Street in Coeymans Hamlet. I had another picture that actually showed a view from the church looking over Coeymans, which is kind of great because you can see all of Coeymans. Today you can't do that, can you, Tom? You can't see all of Coeymans from your house. This site is right behind Tommy Williams' house. on Blaisdell Avenue. If you're familiar with, just as you go up the knoll going toward the cemetery, it would be, the lot is on your left. And at the same time, which I just found this out recently during the research, the Catholic Church, St. Patrick's, also acquired the land for Grove Cemetery. So you see the arrow is about where the church was located. So the great thing is in Fletcher's diaries, and I don't want to steal too much of John's thunder for next week, but I do want to talk about just a few of the entries for the Catholic Church. So on 20th of April 1852, he says, I go with Catholic priests to look at a site for a church. The 21st of April, he says, I gave up writings to Catholic for church and cemetery lot. Take a note signed by Timothy Clancy, Irishman, and Michael Dowling and Dennis Tobin for $200. So basically this is when he's purchasing both the land for the church and the land for the cemetery. He surveys the Catholic Church lot, then they survey the cemetery. In May, August, they lay out the cemetery, and then he gives them the deeds, and they take the note. And Fletcher's actually holding the mortgage for this property at this point. September, he goes to meet with the Catholics about building a church. And the 29th of September, 1852, he takes a contract to build the church for the Catholics. So they give him a note for $200, and they pay him $198, which he gives them a receipt for. Great stuff. I mean, Fletcher kept very detailed notes, and John will tell you it's next month. So then, laying out the cemetery, you'll see, and I've kind of outlined it in red, hopefully you can see it, but the cemetery, if you're familiar with the old St. Patrick's Cemetery, it's this area. So today, Grove consists of this section all the way around and on this side here. So St. Patrick's, old St. Patrick's, is just a little island in the middle of what is now known as Grove Cemetery. Later on, and I didn't look to see if I had a date on that, John, but later on apparently is when St. Patrick's acquires the lower portion for the new cemetery. And I don't know when that happened, but that was later on. So actually today, St. Patrick's owns all the way down to 144, which is now, it's actually controlled by the Albany Diocesan Cemeteries. Additional diary entries, he makes out a bill for the Catholic Church, he takes his team, and they go to Albany to get lumber for the Catholic Church. I went to Albany yesterday, and I don't like going to Albany. Fletcher goes with a team of horses to get lumber for the Catholic Church. I have no idea. John and I were talking about it earlier, how long it would have taken to go up there and back to get a team of lumber. But just think, this is 1852. 9W didn't exist. 144 that we know today doesn't exist. These are all windy back roads that are not paved, and they're going to bring their lumber down. October, he's bringing stone in for the church, and then they start building it. I don't want to go over all of these, but then in June, he settles with the Catholic, takes a bond and mortgage on the Catholic Church for $652. And then there's continual entries during the months of June, July, August, September, and October of that year. On April of 1854, he and John Ray go to a Catholic meeting, and Timothy Clancy pays them an additional $30 on the loan. And then on July 1854, Reverend Finnegan pays him $80 for the last contract of the Catholic Church. So by 1854, the church is pretty much done. We actually have in our possession an article agreement for the sale of land, and it's in our archives here. But this is just a facsimile of that, just saying article of agreement made this 21st day of April 1852 between Fletcher, Blaisdell, Coeymans, County of Albany, State of New York, and Timothy Clancy, Michael Dowling, and Dennis Tobin of the second part, in consideration of the sum of $100. And it goes on and talks about that. The interesting thing is, I found that it's these three gentlemen that are contracting with Fletcher. It's not the diocese that's contracting with Fletcher. And I'm not sure how that plays out over the years. But originally it was those three men that contracted with them. This is just a little facsimile. It talks about what the mortgage boundaries are that are recorded in the deed for the Catholic Church. It says all that certain piece of land situated in the town of Coeymans, County of Albany, State of New York, on the east part of Fletcher Blaisdell's farm, being the site of which a Catholic church is now erected and bounded, and abutted as follows, beginning at a stake of stones, I'm sure they're still standing there, on the east side of the road leading to Grove Cemetery, running southerly about 141 feet to a stake of stone, then easterly about 142 feet to the east line of Fletcher Blaisdell's farm. Do you think they're still there, Tom? I don't think so. So they built this simple Greek revival church on this edifice, and this becomes the church for a number of years. It measures 30 feet by 40 feet inside, and the congregation is now established as a mission church for St. Mary's in Coxsackie. So it's not an independent parish, it's a mission church of the Coxsackie parish. The church is valued at $1,200 with an annual pastoral salary of $100. The first congregation has 75 communicants. This great picture, which is from the St. Patrick's archives, is an interior shot of that original church. It had stained glass windows. It had what appears to be a marble altar, whether or not it's marble or not. There's statues. The 1875 records show the property value rose to $2,500 with a salary going from $100 up to $500 per year. And at that point, there's 100 people attending with 80 communicants. The 1860 and 1880 federal census lists 120 Irish-born residents, and Father Martin Stanton is now the pastor over that church, and he has the church refurbished. There's an article in the paper right after that, on October 29, 1878, 1,000 people gathered to witness and take part in the solemn ceremonies of the dedication of a newly arrayed and adorned church. The Right Reverend Bishop McNerney, 3rd Bishop of Albany, dedicates the church and blesses the nearby Catholic cemetery. Everybody here kind of know where Tom Williams lives on Blaisdell Avenue. Can you picture 1,000 people standing there in that area for a church dedication? I can. I can't picture 1,000 people standing at St. Patrick's today for a church dedication. So 1852 to 1890, for 38 years, the priests of St. Mary's administered to the congregation of St. Patrick's. The shot here is the original St. Mary's church, the one that I mentioned that was down near the waterfront. So we had Father William Howard, Father Francis Hurley, Henry Finnegan, Maurice Roche, William Carroll, Martin Stanton, and then finally Thomas P. Walsh. Father Walsh becomes the first, well actually Father Harrigan becomes the first independent pastor, but he's only there for a short time. And then he leaves, and Father Walsh is the pastor, and he's the pastor assigned in 1893 for St. Patrick's. And from that point on, St. Patrick's becomes an independent parish. September 1894, they have a meeting, they incorporate, and Father Walsh has two trustees, Mr. Peter Smith and John Kelly, and they sign the certificate of incorporation, which is on file at the church here in Virginia. Complete refurbishing of the church happens again at a cost exceeding $1,000. Then in August of 1896, St. Mary's in East Durham is established as a mission church of St. Patrick's in Ravenna, with Father Walsh as pastor, and he also administers to a small Wyndham congregation. Think, 1896, Father Walsh is going to East Durham to St. Mass. He's going up to Wyndham in the Catskill Mountains to St. Mass. Again, this is on horseback.
In January.
In January. I can't imagine all of them. And then at this point, Father Walsh begins the construction on the first parochial residence, which is the first rectory First Rectory is where we know as the last parish convent. So it's across the street from the church, and this was the only portion of the building that was built at the time. That's the original rectory, which later became the original convent, the first convent. This is before the rectory was built in its current location. Father Walsh, the value of the property grows from $1,000 to more than $12,000 in 1905. That picture photograph on your right is Father Walsh with some altar boys at the dedication of the old church bell outside the original church. So we get to the 1900s. The interesting thing is we do not have 1890 census available. I don't know if those of you who do genealogy work, the 1890 census was pretty much destroyed by fire. There was a fire in Washington, and only certain pieces of that census exist today. So we don't really know what was going on here in the town, but we do know that in 1892 there was a New York State census. So we can look at the 1892 census, and then we can look at the 1900 census. And between those 2 years, or those 8 years rather, we see this huge influx of Italian-born people. 230 Italian-born people are living in election district 1 and 2, which is pretty much the hamlet in the upper area of Coeymans by 1900. So we have these 130 Irish families. We now have added to that 230 Italian families. For the most part, most are coming from Catholic families. Whether or not they're mostly church-going people, we don't know. But it certainly makes it necessary to look at building a new church. And so in 1917, well before that, 1916, Father Roach is appointed as pastor of St. Patrick's Church. And that's when they determined that due to the large growth of the Catholic population, a larger church is needed. So on October 17th, 1917, under the direction of Father Roach, the cornerstone of the present St. Patrick's Church is laid. And that's something, those of you who were here a few years ago, 2017, we had a big celebration celebrating the 100th anniversary of the laying of that cornerstone and the building of that church. So this is an actual, we actually have a copy of the original invitation, and that's the original invitation to say the pastor and trustees of St. Patrick's Church, Queens, New York, invite you to be present at the laying of the cornerstone of the new St. Patrick's Church with the Right Reverend Joseph A. Delaney, Vicar General, on Sunday afternoon. The invitations, they actually played the Star Spangled Banner at the beginning of this, Johnny, so they didn't do church music. But interesting, with all the ceremonies of the Catholic ritual afforded, the cornerstone of the new St. Patrick's Church was laid on Sunday afternoon in the presence of 2,000 people. Seldom have the people of this community witnessed such an impressive religious demonstration, and the event will live long in the memory of the pastor, Reverend F.A. Roach, and the members of the congregation. Now keep in mind that this is written by a Protestant. The parade, starting at the post office, consisted of Heights Band of Rensselaer, the men of the congregation, 7 autobuses filled with visiting Albanians that marched to the site of the new church. A platform beautifully draped with American flags has been erected for the ceremony and was used by the visiting priests, the KFC choir, and invited guests. The Right Reverend Monsignor Joseph A. Delaney, Vicar General of Albany, was officiating prelate and assisted by 25 visiting priests. An eloquent sermon on the need of religion in the world today was delivered by Reverend Joseph Scully of Albany. That goes to talk about the KFC choir rendering the hymns, and they took up a collection. That collection offering amounted to $400. In today's dollars, it's about $9,300. So I mean, we're talking 1917, we're just at the beginning, getting ready for World War I, and they still took up a collection of that much money, so it's pretty impressive. The new church will be 42 by 75 foot in size and have a seating capacity of 350. The structure will be built of brick, trimmed with stone, and a slate roof, and an auditorium will be finished with polished wood. It will cost $15,000. Interesting. So the first Mass for that church, when it was completed, was held on June 11th, 1918. And then the first wedding took place on September 9th, 1918. First people to be married in the church was Miss Maria Matamore and Johnny Quinn of Ravenna. They were married in front of a small group of friends at the church. Masses at the time were held at 10 a.m. and all regular services took place in the new church in the future. So then we get to our next pastor, who is Reverend Christopher J. King, 1921 to 1935. 1921, under the guidance of Father King, the congregation decides to construct a parochial school. So 1922, they build the school the same year as this building was built. And probably by the looks, if you compare that building and this building, probably the same people built it. They're very similar in that if you look at the top of St. Patrick's Church, there's a stone carving that shows the years. This building has a very similar carving on it. We kind of think it's possible that they were built by the same people. Sunday Masses at this time are 6:30 in the morning and 9:30 in the morning. Growing up, we used to go to 6:30 Mass.
Yeah, you're not.
All right, St. Patrick's School, the first year. 1922, the school's erected. 1923, the school opens its doors with 265 students, grades 1 through 8. There was 132 boys and 133 girls. Pretty good amount of people. Sisters of Mercy of Albany are entrusted with the task of education. And the first sisters are Sister Mary Vincent, who was the superior, Sister Mary Pascal, Sister Mary LaSalle, and Sister Mary Mark. So there's only 4 of them down here teaching at the time for all those kids. 1923, the rectory, which I showed on an earlier slide, is converted for the nuns, and that becomes the convent. So 1923, they construct a new rectory, which is the front part of the existing rectory today. June 1924, the first 8th grade graduation. 6 students received their certificates, 4 boys and 2 girls. The first students are Velma Burns, Harry McGloin, Henry Pate, Rose Pate, James Singles, Fred Sorrell, and Monsignor Joseph Delaney of the cathedral addresses them and tells them and invites them to enroll in the Cathedral High School, and he will cover their tuition for free. Which is surprising, and that went on for a few years. The 1926 8th grade class, we don't have the 1924 photograph of that as of yet, but the 1928 class, just to give you an idea of who might have been in it: Michael Almery, Mary Aloise, Jay Bonifate, I think that's Joseph DiMatteo, Catherine Egan, Francis Fatica, John Ford, E. Giacomini, Carmel Martino, A. Mayo, Margaret Pape, and Angelo Scalzo. Thanks to my neighbor Angelo, I was able to get that picture. 1927, we have this picture. We have about 8 pictures of graduating classes of these early years, which is great. Again, familiar names: Fatica, Sorrell, Adamo, Tracy, Rauchi, Conora, Botts, Martino, Ford, McGloin, Genevieve Securo, Alba Mayon, Carmen Pate, that's Chubby's father, Samuel Gatry, Guy Ciccarelli, Salvatore Romano, Theodore Dicitas. And at the same time, they start the annual Assunta Festival, and that takes place, that's huge. They bring in buses from Albany, they have parades, we have some photographs of some of those early parades where the people are marching up Main Street. And you're seeing several hundred people with bands and everything marching up, and they process with the statue of the Blessed Mother on August 15th. This one actually took place on August 16th. So they must not do it if it falls on a Sunday. Then 1935, Father George Murray, Reverend George Murray, replaces Father King. Father Murray is one of the longest serving pastors in this parish. He was 1935, 1955, and he was assigned to replace Father King. He baptized me, married my parents. That's my connection with him. Masses at this time are 7, 9, and 10:15 in the morning. So there's 3 masses every morning, every Sunday morning rather. October 1935, under his direction, they started renovation of the church. So the original church building, those who are familiar with the church building, what is used as a sanctuary today did not exist in the original church, and neither did the priest's sacristy. Those were added in 1935 by Father Murray. I believe it's very possible that also the vestibule in the front was added at that time. We don't have any documentation to show one way or the other, but we kind of think that probably the original church was just from the inner doors to where the wall is as you approach the sanctuary today. Father Murray states that over 300 men from St. Patrick's have been in service, and 290 are currently serving throughout the world. This is in World War II. And Father Murray is the one who begins a religious education program for the parish's high school students who are attending public schools. In 1952, the parish undertakes a major fund drive to build an elementary school. And the goal of the fund drive was in excess of $80,000, which was achieved, and the new school was constructed, designed by Dominic D'Ambrosio, and this new school opened in 1953. Reverend Thomas Quinn of Coxsackie requested that St. Patrick's sisters give religious instructions at St. Mary's in Coxsackie. So it was shortly after that. Originally they started going down in a taxi cab, and later on they bought the sisters a station wagon, and the proverbial sisters coming down in a station wagon. And that's how I was taught religious instructions. On Saturday mornings, the sisters from St. Patrick's would come to St. Mary's and we would sit in different sections of St. Mary's Church and have our religious instructions. Under the direction of Father Murray, Sisters of Murray, the Mercy Convent was substantially renovated, and that's when the big addition with the chapel was added on the side. They did some formal gardens on the outside, and the size of the convent actually doubled in size, with 9 new rooms in the chapel. It was dedicated by Bishop Scully on January 16th, 1955. That project cost in excess of $55,000. After 20 years of service to St. Patrick's, Father Murray is elevated to the title of Right Reverend Monsignor, and then he's reassigned to a parish in Troy, I believe it was, in 1955. This is just a overview of the stained glass windows. I just wanted to show it quick. I'm not going to go into detail, but we do have some information. We do not know when they were placed in church. There's different theories. I have my theory. John Bonafide has his theory. These are side windows of the original church building. This is the front sanctuary window. This is the rear window going over the door. These are the St. Peter and St. Paul windows in the back of the church. I believe, this is just me, I believe that these 6 windows were original to the church. My only reasoning for that is the old church that you saw earlier had stained glass windows in it. I cannot believe that the people that built that church would have built this without any stained glass windows in it. I just don't believe that. And if you look at these closely, they're totally, and if you're ever in the church and you notice, these 6 windows are of total different design than the other windows in the church. They're much darker, they're an earlier period stained glass window. They're just totally different. These are a much lighter and brighter window, the other windows. Again, it's just my theory. We have no documentation. We've looked for years, we cannot find it. So we have the new school. The new school's built, it's enlarged. This is what the interior of the sanctuary looked after the addition. So the altar, the rear-facing altar, there were 2 angels. This was actually blue and gold. So the walls were blue with this gold flocking on it. In the right sunlight today, you can still see the outline of some of that flocking. The altar rail, there were several statues. The only thing that remains today is this woodwork here. This has been dropped down because now we have the organ pipes that sit above it. But for the most part, we have a small piece of the altar rail that still exists. That's the school. So as I said, it was designed by Dominic Ambrosio, who was a parishioner. Sister Mary McTeald was a superior, and they included a pre-primer room, which is kindergarten, grades 1 through 4, principal's office, and the nurse's room. They added, so this is the first time they had a kindergarten room. Kindergarten room is where the thrift shop is today. It had its own bathroom, it had a coat closet, it had its own exterior entrance, which is still there today. It pretty much looks like that today. I don't know if the bathroom is still there. It's still there. This closet's still there. I mean, it hasn't changed all that much. But it was so that the kindergarten kids, the parents could come in and get them. Right, Josie, did you go there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Billy?
I did.
Sister Matilda was still there when I was there.
Was she still there? All right, these are just a few shots. This is a shot of the school children proceeding over to Mass, and they're all lined up to go to Mass in church. We have a picture of 4 altar boys, Stanley Pagano, Billy Basati, Andrew Mayone, and Tony DiMatteo.
Wow.
And then over on the far right, graduation day, it's Francis Nunziato, Bonnie Kirby, who was later Bonnie Russo, Marilyn, it says a DDO in the paper, but it might be a BDO, I'm thinking, I don't know. It's the graduation class of 1952. And this is the graduation, 8th grade graduation class of 1954. Recognize her?
Yep.
Yeah.
And Peggy Matheny, Peggy Biscoe, Mary Ann Morrell, Helen Burtz, Tommy McEnroe, Rose Scordanis, Margaret Basati, Chris Consul, Arlene Ray, Terry Hughes, Teresa Paisitas, Carolyn Morrow. We don't know who this woman is. And we don't know, 1, 2, 3, who this guy is. Other than that, we have all the names.
That might be George Weisenberg.
Think so? Yeah. I'll have you look at it sometime, Bob, and we'll try to figure it out. Sisters of Mercy, they were here for many years. We actually are blessed to have a written copy from the Sisters of Mercy that cover the entire years they were here, 1923 to not up to 1974. I think they wrote it up to the late 60s, but it's a handwritten, I should say typewritten, from the Sisters of Mercy about their history here. And it's very interesting. So one of these days we'll get it published and people will see. But this is just a few pictures of some of the sisters, Sister Ignatius with Nancy Pate, and then Sister Williams, Sister Luke, and Sister Richard. Sister Richard was my first communion teacher. And when I met her many, many, many years later, she still remembered me.
Is that good or bad?
Sister, I mean, I think anybody that had Sister Richard was a wonderful person. She really was. And we got to, I got to know her later in life. She actually wrote a wonderful article which, for those who were around for the 2017 anniversary, we did a book. So in this book, there is an article about our Nativity Center. And in the article, there's a story written, Christmas in Ravenna, Broken Baby Jesus, by Sister Elizabeth McDaniel, former Sister Mary Richard. It's a great story. I have these books available if anybody doesn't have one and wants to buy them. They're for St. Patrick's, they're $10 a piece. We still have quite a few left. And it has a lot of this history in it, a lot of the photographs. It was a lot of the photographs of the 2017 events in it and what went on during that 100th anniversary year. But her story about the broken baby Jesus is just a great story. And we publish it a number of times in our bulletin for parishioners. After this, Father Coeymans is replacing Father Murray. He comes in, the school enrollment is still up, it's 381. And at this point, he's assigned an assistant pastor, Father Ralph Marini. Many people remember Father Marini came. Sister Mary Bernice assumes the superiorship of the convent, and with her is Sister Mary Regis, Thomasina, Laetitia, Raparda, Cabrini, and Irene. So there's 7 sisters teaching in Ravenna with an enrollment of 381 pupils. And once again, the church interior is redecorated. And during Father Coeymans' time, he does a substantial landscaping. I think that's when they added all the hedges, if everybody remembers when the hedges were in place. But on March 13th, Father Coeymans tragically dies from injuries received in an automobile crash. He's the only, well, he's not the only serving pastor, but he died suddenly while he was at St. Patrick's. So he is followed by Father Hicks. Father Hicks, 1957 to 1961. We are still, we still have St. Mary's in East Durham as a mission church during all of this time. So he's very involved with St. Mary's in East Durham. Under Father Hicks, the enrollment of the school rises to 420 students, with an additional 270 students outside in public school receiving religious instructions. 1959 he purchases the lot in the corner of Harris Avenue and Main Street. I don't know how many people remember the old derelict house there. I remember it, and he bought that, tore it down, and made that into the church parking lot, which we use today. He's also the pastor who replaced the original pews, and at the same time did the lighting. So the pews that are there today were replaced in 1960 at a cost of $7,100. Father Hicks is reassigned in February 1961, so he's only there short 4 years. He's replaced by Father John Taft, who comes in February, named pastor. Within several months, he's reassigned to St. John's in Galatia, and he's replaced by Father Burns. Father Taft dies suddenly in August of 1961. So the same year he's appointed pastor, later in that year he passed away. We don't know the circumstances about it. In the history of the book we have down below, it says that he died in a car accident. He did not die in a car accident. I think possibly a heart attack, or he was sick. It's possible he was sick. Bill Pape, Father Bill Pape, started to tell me the story one day when we were talking on the phone, and then we got distracted. We never finished. We were supposed to touch base again and talk about it, and it never happened. And unfortunately, Bill recently passed away. So that story is left with Bill. Father Burns comes in. Father Burns is also appointed a Monsignor. He comes in, Sunday Masses are 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. 4 Masses on a Sunday morning, right? But they're quick Masses, as you can see. They're quick. May 1961, Father Burns gives the benediction in the Atlantic Cement groundbreaking along Governor Nelson Rockefeller, Mayor Townsend, and Supervisor George Volke. And that's the groundbreaking that took place, and that was the building of that. 1962, Father Burns makes a large addition to the rectory and the convent. So additional rectory, in the back of the rectory, the big addition where the offices are today, and additional bedrooms were added, and an additional, I think he went off the back of the convent this time, but they added more space on the convent. By 1964, having that many masses on a Sunday, obviously he needed assistants. He has assistant pastors, Joseph Connolly, Joseph Milio, and Carl Urban as associate pastors. And so the June 1968 graduating class were 24 students in that graduating class. Father Burns suddenly dies. He's found passed away in the rectory on September 6, 1968. A pontifical celebrated mass is held for him at St. Patrick's with Bishop McGinn as the principal celebrant, and Monsignor Burns is buried in St. Patrick's Cemetery. He's the only pastor that we've ever had that's buried in St. Patrick's Cemetery. He's replaced temporarily by Father Charles Lockwood, who's named an administrator for a short period of time until a new pastor is named. These are two early 1950, 1960 pictures. So this is the church, how it appeared after some of the landscaping. And this is an aerial view of the church. You notice there's no courtyard around the school building. It was all blacktop, so they would use that as parking back then. And the entrance to the church is different than it was today. You do see the rectory addition on this building here. So we now get to Father Harold Coeymans. Father Coeymans comes in 1968. He's there to 1978. He's our first post-Vatican II pastor. We have this photograph of Father Coeymans with a front-facing altar. I don't know if this is the original front-facing altar, because there was a marble front-facing altar for a time period. This looks very similar to the altar we have today, but I don't know that it is. We don't have that information. We had a white front-facing marble altar for a time period. That came out of Our Lady of Angels Seminary in Glenmont. When they closed, we got the front-facing altar and the tabernacle from the chapel up there. But I don't know the time period as far as the two. I wasn't able to find that out. Under Father Coeymans, he has assistant pastors as well, Father Carl Urban, Father Milio, Father Larry Frank, who married Gail and I, and then Father Tita arrives at St. Patrick's. June 1972, the parish council meets and votes in favor of closing St. Patrick's School due to the parish not being able to financially support it. The current enrollment is 186 pupils and a staff of 4 nuns, 7 lay teachers, including the music teacher. The last 4 remaining nuns are Sister Maura as principal, and Sisters Paula, Sister Matilda, and Sister Celeste. Sister Celeste, if you, when you get ready to leave today and you look above the Harry Sturgis Center over there where the books are, there's a couple paintings. The painting on the right is this Sister Celeste original piece of work. She apparently was a prolific painter, and she did ceramics. A lot of people in town have the ceramic Christmas trees that were done with Sister Celeste's classes. And most
Rectory
people,
basement.
huh?
They were in the rectory basement.
Yeah, they did it in the rectory basement. They also, so in 1974 is when the pipe organ is installed. And so this is the first pipe organ that was installed in the Albany Diocese in some time. It was custom built by the LA Carlson Organ Company. It was donated by the Biscombe family in remembrance of Mrs. Biscombe's mother, I forget her first name, Rotella was the last name. And during this time, Bishop Broderick 1974, he approves closure of St. Patrick's School. So the convent is then sold to Hillside House, which is then made into a group home. It's an organization formed by Dr. Frank Philippone, and it was a home for developmentally disabled, and it remained that way for many, many years. 1975, the Assumpta Festival was revived, and then 1979, Father Coeymans retired. The last class, 1974, these are the students. Just look down the list, there's a number of names. Diane Kinley's in this group, John Nearai's in this group. Joe Nunziato, not Lori's Joe, but the other Joe Nunziato. Paul Vasto, John's uncle. So a number of people. And thank you to Diane Kinley who provided that photograph for me. After Father Coeymans, we did Father Joseph Curzon. He comes in 1979 to 1981. Father Curzon was very socially conscious, and his main legacy for the town of Coeymans and St. Patrick's Church is developing our thrift shop, our food pantry, Ravenna Senior Projects. The first Ravenna Senior projects was in St. Patrick's Hall. Thrift shop opened in the former kindergarten room, and at that time Father Curzon modernized the sanctuary of the church. He took out the original altar, he moved the choir behind the front-facing altar, he took out a lot of stuff. But he made a lot of major changes. He put a couple of mosaic panels on the sides, which are no longer there. He did install the first carillon. He put in a new sound system in the church. He began the television ministry, which we still have today. So the first televised masses that were done with cable TV in this area were started by Father Curzon. And then Father Curzon became ill, so he retired due to illness and began his career as an author, and these are a number of his books that he wrote. These are from my personal collection, and most of them are all autographed by Father Joe. So when he leaves, Father Paul Tartaglia is assigned as parish administrator. Becomes very controversial because Father Tartaglia earlier had been a long-time pastor at St. Mary's in Coxsackie. So as soon as Father Tartaglia got here, people were coming from Coxsackie in droves. So they quickly pulled Father Tartaglia away from us. So we didn't get to have him very long. They realized that if he stayed here, Coxsackie would suffer. So along came Father Francis Dubois. He was the next pastor. He was here from 1981 to 1986. He started the children's liturgies. He was very involved with the Diocesan Renew program. He had an associate pastor, Father Bernie Turner. He instituted a lot of the lay volunteer initiatives that we have today. Money counters, Eucharistic ministers, lectors. He formed the first renovation committee. They insulated the ceiling of the church. They added fans. They did quite a bit of things. But in 1986, he was reassigned to St. Ambrose in Latham. And so he was followed by Father Ronald Menti. Under Father Menti, he was here from 86 to 91. He wanted to do a lot of church modernizations. He, I forget how many different programs we went through. They first talked about building a new church in the property in the back. Then he talked about turning the church on its side. Then he talked about making the whole, the church, with the church becoming gathering space. But at the end of the day, the parish family, for the most part, voted against that. And at the end of the day, it was voted on to instead undertake a big $160,000 capital campaign to make repairs to the current church. And that's what did. So they replaced the cross on the roof of the church, did chimney work, replaced all the flue tiles, fixed the parking lots, repaired the carillon bell system, installed gutters on the rectory, storm windows on all those stained glass windows, because originally there was no protection to the stained glass on the outside. So now they added protection to the stained glass on the outside. They were quite drafty. Put a new heating system in the school, replaced the rectory windows, and installed a walkway from the church, from the back of the church to the back parking lot. He also painted the trim on the dormers. During that time period, they also celebrated the parish centennial as a parish. So they produced this book at that point, and that is the centennial of the parish, not the church, but the parish, of the original parish founding. Which is celebrating that 1890 date when it became an independent parish, not when the original church was built. During that time period, the St. Patrick's complex, so the church, the rectory, the school, the convent, are all also listed on the New York State Register of Historic Places. At the time, the diocese was not in favor of that and entered I wouldn't say a complaint, but an objection to having it listed on the National Register. So it's not listed on the National Register, however, it's listed as eligible for the National Register. So it's on the New York State Register, it's eligible for the National, but it's not on the National. In February 1991, Father Menti is reassigned to St. Joseph's Parish in Scotia. And 1991, Father Vincent Ciatoli is named as the new pastor. Weekend masses are 5 p.m. on Saturday, 8 and 10 on Sunday, and no assistant pastor anymore. We haven't had one since Father Dubois. Father Ciatoli undertakes a second capital campaign. They realized that the church needs to become handicap accessible. They had a number of architectural firms come in. The diocesan architectural consultants came down, and the recommendations were not to put ramps in, not to do anything like that, but to do an architectural landscaping, enhancing the front, which makes it handicap accessible. So this is when the current plaza in front of the church is built, with the two sidewalks that come and are tapered up so that they're handicap accessible that way. So it looks a lot better architecturally than just putting a ramp. At this time, they also did an interior renovation. They repainted the interior, put new carpet in the sanctuary area, put a new statue of the Blessed Mother in, a new tabernacle, and a new acolyte cross was added. And then a lot of additional landscaping. The other thing that was undertaken at the time was all the way around the church. The basement of the church used to undergo an extensive amount of flooding. So they dug all the way around the church a trench and added drainage, proper drainage to improve the drainage so that the flooding wouldn't occur. It still floods, but not like it used to. It used to flood and ruin the boiler. Go back a bit. So in September of 2005, Father Vincent's reassigned to St. Teresa of Avila in Albany. And then we get a short-term pastor for 5 years, Reverend Stuart Steele. He's a expat from the United Kingdom. He's here because he has family in the area who were ill, and he could be closer to his family. And he was named administrator of St. Patrick's, and he was administrator for a number of years, and then he actually was named pastor, I believe, for the last few years he was here. During his tenure, the St. Patrick's website was created, bringing St. Pat's into the digital age. He eliminated the position of a part-time cook and added a small kitchen on the second floor where the pastor could do their own cooking. Masses at that point were 4:30 p.m. vigil Saturday and 10 a.m. Mass on Sunday. And the Sunday Mass was designated as a family liturgy with a contemporary choir called the Holy Harmony, which added to the music ministry in addition to the regular choir. This is also the time period that the fundraiser festival of baskets was started, and that still continues to today. It's one of the it's the second major fundraiser that the church has. In 2010, Father Stewart leaves to return to his native country. He's only given permission from the bishop in the UK to be here for a certain length of time, and apparently at that point he's recalled by the bishop in London. So he is replaced by Father James Kane. Father Kane comes here, he's here in 2010. He's the last official resident pastor of St. Patrick's Church. He's here, he comes in July 1st, 2010, he's named as pastor. He brings a new focus on ecumenical work to St. Patrick's. He's the diocesan ecumenical something or other, but he's tasked with that program and he's very involved with the Jewish community, the Muslim community, and so he brings a lot of wealth of knowledge in those fields. And he brought some of that down, and he would hold seminars and different things to the parishioners. He would invite other faiths and witnesses to baptisms and other celebrations. And he also had to take on the difficult task of cutting expenses and positions to bring the expenses in line with the budget, which he was able to do. He increases volunteer opportunities. They establish a volunteer office staff, they volunteer cleaning staff. During his tenure, they take a parish census to update the number of parishioners truly assigned. They install a new bathroom in the church, and a new electronic bell carillon system is installed. He himself purchases new hymnals for the entire parish. On January 2015, Father Kane retires from active priesthood, and once he leaves, we are assigned Deacon Al Manzella, who's from Bethlehem, Delmar area, who becomes our parish administrator until a new pastor is named. At this point, they have to wait because Father Moyna of Coxsackie is also in the position to be about to retire, and the plan is to replace Father Kane and Father Moyna with one priest, and that's what happens. In 2015, Reverend Scott Vanderveer, who many of you probably are familiar with, becomes the pastor of both St. Patrick's and St. Mary's, and we come 163 years full circle from the time that we were a joint parish and shared a pastor to once again sharing a pastor. They develop a new mass schedule with St. Mary's, so St. Patrick's gets the 4:30 p.m. vigil on Saturday and the 9:30 a.m. on Sunday, and St. Mary's gets the 7:30 and 11:30 on Sundays. Father Scott undertakes a major capital campaign to replace the heating system in the school, paint the church, replace carpet, replace the floor in the church, install a new kitchen in the parish center, install handicap bathrooms. The response to this capital campaign is overwhelming. I think the original request was 150,000, and we got 300,000, something like that. So we got almost double but it's a great salesman. He was able to bring in the funds, and a lot of this work is still to be done, like the handicap bathrooms in the school still have to be done. There's still some other repairs that are in the process of working through. But a lot of the major work has been done already. The kitchen has definitely been done, and it's much better now. We have a wonderful kitchen in our parish center. A new parish mission statement is developed during that time period, which reads, "We embrace people who search for a spiritual home, we serve those in need, and we grow our parish through the involvement of our youth." And then we're hit with COVID. The parish, March 15th, 2020, we go into total shutdown. We no longer have in-person masses. and it remains that way until late summer of that year. So everything is done virtually from that point on, and it's been difficult to recover from that. But we're getting there. June 26th and 27th, the weekend of that, Father Scott announces that he'll be leaving that September and reassigned to St. Mary's in Glens Falls, where he's needed to help them because they have a high school and a school building and he has the expertise to help with that. He was a former parochial school teacher in the Boston area. So on September 12th, 2021, Father Scott says his final Mass, and he says that jointly with incoming Father Joseph O'Brien, who is a parochial vicar, not a pastor, for St. Patrick's. This is just a few pictures of our 2017 celebration events that occurred when Father Scott was here. It's a special proclamation from the Pope that we received. We have two liturgies. We had a liturgy on June 17th, 2017 to recognize the 100th anniversary of the laying of the cornerstone, and then we had one the following year to celebrate the anniversary of the first Mass. So these are pictures of the parishioners. It's a very large attendance. At the second Mass, many of the former pastors and associates were here, and also a few people who served here as seminarians as well. So it was a huge attendance. We also, that year, did a St. Patrick's Day dinner. We did several receptions. We did a festival in the back where we had almost 1,000 people attend, which was great. And we reinstituted our first spaghetti supper in a while, held in our own kitchen, which was renovated at that point. So it brings us till today. Today we fall under a regional group, which is under Father J. Atherton, who is considered our pastor, and Father Joseph O'Brien, who's the parochial vicar. So to give you an idea, it's kind of like a hub and spoke effect where Father J oversees all of the Greene County parishes plus Ravenna. So Ravenna is lumped into with Greene County. So those parishes, it's called the Hudson Valley Vicariate West Network right now. It's 8 parishes plus Ravenna. So it's St. Patrick's and St. Mary's, St. John the Baptist in Greenville, St. Patrick's of Athens, St. Patrick's Catskill, St. Teresa in Wyndham, Our Lady of Knock in East Durham, which used to be one of our mission churches, Sacred Heart in Palinville, and Immaculate Conception in Haines Falls, and Sacred Heart in Carroll. In December 2022, there was an announcement of the consolidation of the administration of resources into one office in Catskill, New York. So the administration of both St. Patrick's and St. Mary's, plus these additional churches, are all going to be managed out of a central office at the old St. Patrick's School in Catskill, where the St. Patrick's Church actually operates out of down there. So again, 171 years, another full circle. If you think about when I spoke earlier and the tie-ins with St. Mary's in East Durham and Wyndham and all of these things, a lot of this has to do with the lack of resources. To give you an idea, in 1969, this is shortly after Vatican II, and Bishop Scully, I believe is bishop, there were 764 priests in the Albany Diocese, 154 religious brothers, 1,903 nuns, 422,000 Catholics, and 55% of the Catholics' children were attending Catholic schools. So a huge difference. I mean, out of 764 priests, what are we down to? 160, 170 priests left in the diocese today. We do keep getting some new ones every year, but not keeping up with the retirement, that's for sure. St. Patrick's has been blessed to send 5 of our sons to priesthood. We have Father James O'Neill, who's still living. He's at Teresian House in Albany. Father Anthony Diocetus, who's passed away. Father Bill Pape, who recently passed away. Father Peter Russo, who is still in the area. And then Father Rick Lesser, who is now the pastor of St. Thomas Delmar, St. Matthew's Fouriersville, St. Lucy's in Altamont, Christ Our Light. That's it for now. For now. So but we don't get many people going to the priesthood today. So, and this is what St. Patrick's Church looked like this morning, or for the past 2 weeks. This is how it sits as of today. And just a few acknowledgments. John Bonifati, who helped write a lot of, in this original book, he wrote the history up to the 1974 period, and then I've added to it. And then I worked on the 2017 one. John Blaisdell for the Fletcher Blaisdell Diaries. Dennis has been giving me snippets of information. The Sisters of Mercy, the writings that they gave me are wonderful. For those who don't know, all of the newspapers in the area, the Knowle News Heralds, they were originally microfilmed, but thanks to a grant of our local library here in the town, these have been digitized, and they're now on a site called New York State Historic Newspapers. You can go in and search them, and you can actually do, it's all done through OCR recognition, so you can actually put in keywords and actually search for articles, and a lot of the information I've worked through for this has come out of that. There's also another book, which is great if you ever get a chance to look at it, Canals and Crossroads. This was done for the Diocesan Sesquicentennial. It's a great historical resource for the Catholic Diocese of Albany. And of course, in our own historical society, the Harry Sturgis collection was a wealth of information. And obviously the Church of St. Patrick's and the historical records and photo albums that I was able to use there. And the census records from the federal government. And that's it. Any questions at all?
Father Kane is still saying Mass up North Country.
Yeah, well, when you retire as a priest, you have to keep saying
And
until they say.
Father Dubois in Cape Cod,
Well, in summer,
Yarmouth in the summer.
We went-
Yeah, I do that.
we went to, in Yarmouth, and we ran into him saying, we went to Mass, and that's right, that was like Father Dubois, sure enough. So,
All right, great. Well, thank you very much.
yeah, that's what shabby, huh?
John, you're on next month.
Yeah.
Looking forward to carrying that. Thank you all for coming.
Nice job.
Thanks.
He's in